Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Yes, indeed, we do. We have Zed Jelani on. He's got some new exclusive comments from Noam Chomsky about the First Amendment. We'll dig into that with Zed. We've got Wendell Potter on, of course, former healthcare exec who's a traitor to his industry, talking about Medicare for all in the midst of a pandemic. Very important subject that, frankly, there hasn't been nearly enough focus on actual healthcare during this pandemic. But we want to start with some new reporting from the Washington Post, specifically about the way that the Trump campaign and administration is thinking about their coronavirus
Yeah, that's
response.
right. Well, as you can see there up the screen, we've criticized the administration for not appearing to have a holistic, kind of grasp upon the crisis. Now, White House officials also hope Americans will grow numb to the escalating death toll. They're of the belief that people will get over it if we stop highlighting it, the base will move on, and the public will learn to accept 50 to 100,000 new cases a day. Now, this is flawed for many reasons. Number one of which is just not true. All public polling indicates that the moment the campaign and the administration was not seen as having a major handle on the coronavirus, that all demographic groups, as we talked with Ryan Grimm last week, have begun to shift away from Trump. White working class, elderly voters, senior voters, millennial voters, Gen X, everybody, every single group. And the overall approval rating is down to, I think the Gallup poll came out yesterday, 38% approve, 57% disapprove. That disapproval number at one of the historic highs of the Trump presidency. That is actually probably more important than even the approval number, because whenever you have soft approval but soft disapproval, then that's something that you can overcome. People are ambivalent. But whenever you have such a high disapproval rating, and then you pair that, as we've said here, Trump's political fortunes are completely tied to the coronavirus crisis. And so the more the cases continue to tick up, that means less economic activity is going to resume. I mean, we already see this in states like Texas and in Arizona and in California. They tried to open the bars. They tried to open indoor dining. All of that was shut down.
Right.
The moment the cases went back up, doesn't look like it's coming back for a long time. So getting a handle on the coronavirus crisis is how you get a handle on the economy. They're not mutually exclusive.
That is exactly right. And it's so obvious.
Right,
And you see now Republican governors, the governor of Texas, you see them rolling back their reopening, reimposing restrictions because cases are exploding. And look, we're very fortunate. So far, the death toll has continued to decline. Do you think that's going to hold? It just doesn't make any sense that it would. So yes, we'll cross our fingers and hope for the best. But you see the direction that this is going in. And look, you've got different groups of people. You've got seniors who, by and large, are really genuinely, for very good reason, fearful about their actual lives and health. And if they see these spikes happening across I'm sure you're having conversations with your parents, their friends, my parents, their friends. They're not over this. They're not numb to this. They're not like, let's just go out and party and get back to normal. They are deeply concerned about their health. So you have that group. And then you have a group of people who maybe they're not as fearful because they're younger and they're in better position to be able to weather this virus, although nobody should take this lightly, by the way. But their lives are dramatically restricted by the fact that you still have this pandemic raging. So you can't go about your normal life. You can't go back to your normal job. Maybe you lost your job. Maybe you still don't have that back in sight. You can't go to school the way that you expected to in the fall. All of these things are put on hold because you don't have the crisis in hand. None of this is that complicated either. If the president had from the beginning just hand it off to Anthony Fauci, hand off to the public health officials, just take it seriously. That's all people really want. I don't think anyone wants to lay all the blame for the pandemic at the president. People aren't stupid. They know he didn't create the virus and unleash it. It's not all his fault. But they want to see some sign that he's taking this seriously, that there's real leadership here, that he even cares about it. Here was Anthony Fauci yesterday talking about how, look, we're not even talking about a second spike yet.
Right.
We're still talking about the first wave that we are not nearly out of. Let's take a listen.
The current state is really not good in the sense that, as you know, we had been in a situation where we were averaging about 20,000 new cases a day, and then a series of circumstances associated with various states and cities trying to open up in the sense of getting back to some form of normality has led to a situation where we've now had record-breaking cases. 2 days ago, it was at 57,500. So within a period of a week and a half, we've almost doubled the number of cases. So in answer to your first question, we are still knee-deep in the first wave of this.
Still knee-deep in the first wave of this.
Yeah, that's the most important thing, I think, to understand. And really, it just goes to show you can't wish-cast coronavirus away. And you also, just because you may personally be over something, I mean, this seems to be with Trump, like, me personally is like, I'm just, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I want to forget about it. That doesn't mean that it's not the number one conversation and topic at most people's dinner tables and most people's lives, because the number one impediment to being able to travel is coronavirus. The number one impediment in order to go back to work is coronavirus. So many of these, in order to go out to eat, in order to go out drinking, in order to go hang out with your friends, throw a barbecue. I mean, everything that pervades your social life means that coronavirus is the main thing that is the impediment to that. Now, that is a problem whenever you just try to wish cast it away and say, oh, everybody's just going to get used to it.
Yeah.
People are not going to get used to it. And the real reason is it may be true if the federal government could control how states reopen and they don't, but you see how Texas, Florida, Arizona, Georgia, and California are all handling this crisis. So you can say personally, it's almost like a dual messaging, because the White House will be like, well, it's not the main topic of discussion, but that's all these governors are thinking about. Mm-hmm. And then if they go and they close things, that's also, by the way, why these state governors, by and large, have a very high approval rating.
Yeah.
Much of this is because people think that they have a better handle on it than not. All you have to do is show some competence and some empathy for actually showing that this is a problem in people's lives.
How are people going to become numb to it when there are reminders of it in literally everything that you do?
Yeah, exactly.
Every time you step outside of your home or your apartment and you got to bring the mask, and going to the store becomes this arduous or frightening journey. I mean, literally every aspect of your life and your livelihood is impacted by it. So the idea that people are just going to become numb to it is foolish. Mm-hmm. I think regular viewers of this show will know that we don't spend a lot of time praising Mitch McConnell here. Either one of us, in fairness.
Dual praise today.
Mitch McConnell actually made some pretty reasonable comments about what people should be doing right now. Let's take a listen.
It's important for all of us in public life to continue to emphasize that the single most important thing that each of us can do as individuals to protect not only ourselves, but our friends and colleagues, is to wear a mask. The single most important thing.
Yeah,
how hard was that?
It wasn't
not hard.
But the problem is that Mark Meadows, who I will praise later on today, went out on television yesterday and said there is not a national mask mandate out there. And look, you don't need a legal mandate. I understand the First Amendment and all that.
Sure.
All that other stuff. Fine. But saying, I think everybody should wear a mask. That should be national guidance, not just at the Surgeon General's level, but set at the top from the White House. And I know this is beginning to sound like a cable news segment, but it really is important, because this is what is destroying his presidency over and over and over. Every day that this is not taken seriously, the presidency continues to slip from his grasp in re-election. And it's mystifying that it's not that easy to understand that handling coronavirus crisis is how you handle the economy. And I mean, everywhere we see, like Texas, Florida, so many others. I mean, we have some video of a Texas doctor talking about, I mean, this sounds like New York. That's what we were talking about the other day, is that Scott Gottlieb basically said we're at New York levels of epidemic in many of these states. Let's play this Texas doctor talking about ventilators.
I got 10 calls, all of whom young people who otherwise would be excellent candidates to be able to put on ECMO. They're so sick that if they don't get put on, they don't get that support, they're probably going to die. I had 3 beds. And just in making that decision, being able to figure out who really is going to benefit, it is a level of decision making that I don't think a lot of us are prepared.
Yeah. I mean, that's the number one reason that we even went into lockdown in the first place, was in order to not overwhelm the hospital system and not have to go to transfer to a triage care system. And I'm not going to blame, we didn't know, and we still don't know a lot about this virus and much of what the trajectory is. The deaths do continue to trend down. I mean, it's like 500 a day, something like that. And if that continues to hold, then what do we know about this entire thing?
Right.
But that's not a good situation. That sounds exactly like the early days of New York, and the big fear is, like you said, is which if the deaths can be low right now, but then when the overwhelming stuff keeps happening, and if government policy has not tried to get its arms around this thing, then it could spike right back up to those New York levels of deaths where we're getting like 2,000 to 3,000 deaths per day. That is my biggest fear, especially with the number of infections. Right now, it's with younger people. Let's hope that it doesn't particularly make the jump Again, we don't actually know a lot about what's going on here. And at the same time, these economic discussions are happening, right? Which is that this shows you the economy ain't coming back for a long time. The whole, V-shaped and all that stuff. How are you going to go V-shaped whenever all the restaurants in the country are still shut down, mostly, especially in the biggest, most populous, and most, money-spending states? Well, now they're talking about, luckily, some stimulus checks, which is that we saw Mark Meadows and we saw Mitch McConnell both talking about bringing back some stimulus checks. McConnell actually addressed it in that same speech yesterday, saying that we will likely have stimulus checks, but only for people making less than $40,000 a year. That sounds to me like a bargaining position of sorts. And I actually completely disagree with it, because the reason why is the stimulus checks going to so many people. I think, what was the cutoff? Something like $75,000 or not? I think it was 100,000, 75 to 100,000 phased in, but the full amount below 75, by giving it to middle class Americans, actually juiced consumer demand quite high. That, along with the unemployment benefits, having that amount of cash in the economy allowed people in order to spend money. Now, it's not just lower middle class Americans that just need the help here. It's actually, by giving it to everybody, this is one of the only times in which just pumping money into a consumer economy actually will have some widely distributed benefits. It's just a very wrong way to look at it in the middle of a crisis like this.
Absolutely. There were the two pieces that were really effective in helping to stave off the worst of dire economic circumstances. Not that it's been great, by the way, but were the $1,200 payment and the increase, the plus up to $600 plus up in unemployment insurance. The other piece that is complicated, frankly, with if you're going to limit it to $40,000, and to me is really problematic, is previously that was based on like last year's tax returns. Well, a lot of people have taken a hit this year where they would be eligible for that $40,000 cutoff, but they were making more money last year. So what are you going to tell those people? I mean, that's a very hard position to be in. But we did hear Chief of Staff Mark Meadows also indicate that the president would like to see another stimulus check as well. Let's take a listen to that.
I think the president's been very clear that he's supportive of another stimulus check, and yet at the same time we want to make sure that we're addressing things in a real systemic way, whether that is making sure that the take-home check for every American is greater with a payroll tax deduction, whether it's making sure that we provide incentives for American manufacturing to be brought back from abroad. Those are two critical components the president has asked us to address.
Yeah,
no one seems to have any urgency, though. And I mean, I think, frankly, as long as the stock futures are down this morning, so maybe that'll adjust their attitude. But frankly, as long as the stock market is doing well and you see these job numbers that are coming in a little bit better than they expected, I don't think they have a lot of pressure to act.
Yeah, and we got 16 days till the Senate comes back, so who the hell knows what's actually going to happen. But as far as I know, what I think the biggest problem is the dollars don't yet add up, which is that a $1,200 stimulus check is not going to make up the billions being spent in the unemployment insurance. And I agree with their idea about putting back to work pay, but it's not payroll tax. Because payroll tax cut only benefits people who are already at work and remain employed and intact with their employer. So we got to provide some benefit to the actual businesses in order to keep people on the payroll. Like, I don't know, the payroll support program, which we've been talking about for months, but what actually, as Jeff Stein of the Washington Post said, has less political energy behind it than it did whenever it was originally proposed, largely because of these fake numbers. I mean, look, permanent job, this is the most important metric, is not temporary job loss. Permanent job loss. Will you have your job back in 6 months? 1.6 million jobs currently at permanent job loss. The highest rate of permanent job loss in American history so far since the Great Depression. Yeah. That is the number. You focus on that number right there, that it takes so long to bring those things back, as we saw in the Great Recession, and most of the time they don't really come back intact. And I fear that we're really not doing anything about it.
We aren't. And you're so right to point out something we've been trying to consistently say here, which is that the economic response and the health response are not separate. They are the same thing. They are intertwined. You don't get your economy back until you get the pandemic under control. And you don't get the pandemic under control unless you have people feeling like they can stay home and still be able to live and have their livelihood. These things are deeply intertwined. And the one thing that we do know, that we did learn from, when when this thing initially spiked is that by the time you see the numbers really trending out of control, it is too late.
That's how exponential growth works.
That is how it works. All right, we're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.